20 years ago, I started in sales at a wireless carrier in Portland, Oregon. There were no SDRs, there were no BDRs, there were no solution architects, there were no sales engineers, there was no account managers, there was no customer success managers. There was one job called sales. Well, technically, I guess two, sales managers. And you know, back then it was like the way I prospected is I would go into the office and I would use the tool called the white pages to create my lists and dial for dollars in the morning. I would have lunch and then I would go out to business parks and just start knocking on doors. I'd go downtown Portland, I'd go to the top of the building and I'd work my way down until I got kicked out of the building, which happened a few times. It came to prospecting. We didn't have any sequences. We didn't have any cadences. We didn't have CSMs. We just didn't have like any kinds of tools. I know I'm kind of now maybe sounding like I'm the grumpy old man complaining about walking to school, uphill both ways in the snow kind of thing. But I just tell you that to say, from my perspective, I was in sales with no tools. And we live in a time now with the opposite problem, right? There's so many tools that are available. And it's exciting, but it's also really challenging. And I want to just address some things today. We do live in exciting times, and I really am a positive person. I'm a pro tool person, so I'm not going to be up here like I've heard in some panels or things where they're all like tools are bad and all this stuff. I'm like, no, I've worked without them. These are good, and they can really help us a lot. I have 10 years of working in sales enablement. I've been at a startup where I had to actually build it out myself. I've worked at a company of about 8,000 with a team of people, and now it's great that I'm at Medallia and I have a nice, amazing team around me helping out in kind of all things enablement. Now, I personally am an early adopter. I'm one that's doing beta testing all the time. I love working with software vendors even. I always say, if we purchase you, be prepared for feedback. I want to be just completely honest and transparent with them and say, hey, here are the gaps. And so I love it that way. Now, every situation is different. So, maybe what I say, some of it doesn't apply to you. And maybe you'll just out and out disagree with me at times, and that's all right. My goal is that at least when we're done in the next 20, 30 minutes here, that you can at least take one or two different ideas and get some value out of it that way. It's easy to jump into tools, but I want to take a step back because you can go to Home Depot, you can go to Lowe's, and you can get the best tools possible, but it all depends, right? Because the tools required to landscape your yard is very different from painting your house. So it really starts with what is the goal and what is it we're trying to do. I swear I did not write this last night because I want to go to the next slide here. I did not steal this from Forrester. I came up with this about 3 months ago as I was sitting down trying to figure out what is it that we're really trying to do. I want to dumb it down to the basic parts, and it is not quite up there yet. I want to read it to you. You'll see what I mean. There we go. All right, so when I view enablement, at least for where we are, that our goal is developing sales reps who can have competent, confident, and clear conversations with customers. Now, very similar to what Eli was talking about yesterday, so I guess validated my thoughts around this process. Competence, we know, he talked about, that's totally all the different things they need to know, but it's more than that, it's also this confidence piece. The way I think about confidence is when we train airline pilots, they put them in a simulation, and they don't just give them clear blue skies. No, they introduce problems, situations that might occur in real life, so that when it happens, right, they're confident in being able to handle a situation. I don't know when you came in. I flew in during the storm on Wednesday night, and I was in a small jet. It was a jet at least, but it was small, and I've flown quite a bit over the last several years, and it was the bumpiest from cruising altitude to landing that I've ever had. It wasn't just the bumpy, right? It was the side to side, it was the dropping, it was crosswind coming in sideways. And I mean, it was one of those when we landed, like half the plane's clapping, right? One of those kinds of things, and everyone's praying kind of before that happened. And so we're all nervous, but as we're walking out, every single person's talking to that captain, and just to see them, like, to them, it was nothing. They live for it. Why? They have the confidence to handle it because they practice those situations. So when I think of confidence, that's kind of not an overconfidence. And sometimes salespeople can be overconfident for sure. And then clear. And I add the clear piece because I've listened to hundreds of sales calls over the last few years, and you'd be surprised how many times I felt like the customer was more confused at the end of the call than they were at the beginning. So as much knowledge as we can give them, as much confidence we can give them, we have to help them be clear in these conversations. So that is really the goal. And so now I want to kind of pivot in and start talking a little bit about some of the lessons, some of the mistakes I've made. Number one is don't choose solely on price. As they say, you get kind of what you pay for. I went into a startup and I inherited this software that they'd bought it about 6 months before. And they told me they bought it because it was the cheapest. Now, as I was going in and looking at this software, I'd never heard of it before, and I'm looking around and I'm like, for what it does, there's like 2-3 key features that it doesn't have. It's really weird. And so I investigated, and sure enough, even during the evaluation, the software company wrote in the contract, this is kind of crazy, wrote in the contract that they would have these 2 features done within 3 months. It was 6 months, it still wasn't there, they were nowhere near being able to do it, and so we were able to actually not only cancel the contract, but get partial refund, which is crazy. That's another tip, by the way, don't purchase software based on the roadmap, right? Because it's good to know the roadmap, it's good to have a vision of where they want to go, but things change all the time, and so don't purchase by that. The thing that we should do is actually consider the total cost of ownership. There's a lot more than purchase price involved. Time, money, right? What's the implementation like? Are there professional services involved? Is there data migrations? Is there integrations? This is a question I'm asking a lot right now. Does this tool require a part-time or a full-time person to manage it? Because many times the answer is yes, it actually does. And you have to take that into account. At one startup I was at, this was several years ago, this kind of antiquated intranet, wiki kind of thing, and one of the kind where every department dumped everything into it, and so when a sales rep would search for something, like notes from an engineering meeting from 4 years ago would like show up as one of the top results. I mean, it was just horrible. So we set out to find something to solve that, and sure enough, startup, my first kind of sales enablement, kind of starting from the ground up, and we bought something because it was cheap. And we got it. Now I have to say that in the end, it was way better than what we had. What I didn't know was, as someone who was running the entire sales enablement department myself, how much time and effort to not only launch it, but to maintain it was just overwhelming to me. And plus, once I started putting salespeople content in there, other departments, they would say, hey, we want access to that too. Within a couple of months, we had tripled the number of licenses, which while it was good for the startup company, it wasn't good for our budget. So it's not always about the price. Consider the total cost. This was mentioned yesterday, and super, super important. Every single time I've purchased software at a company, I've had to make a business case for it. Literally, at one startup, I had to sit in front of the CFO and the CEO and do a presentation on why I thought that software was going to add value to our company. Every single time I've had to do that. Thankfully, the vendor that we had chosen armed me as the champion with a good champion deck. They helped me to be able to present. Our sales methodology, we talk about arming and building up a champion. A champion defined as someone who's selling internally for you, even when you're not in the room. And so I oftentimes am the champion. And so having the vendor be able to prepare and help me make the business case is absolutely critical. But one thing is important is when you're building your business case, don't take the numbers and the stats that the marketing department of that company uses. You got to make it personal, right, to you. We're not going to go into I don't want to go into details about how to build a business case. You can find them online. But basically, right, you're just asking, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Right? Why do we need to solve it now? What's some of the positive business outcomes? Are we trying to decrease ramp time? Building a basic ROI. I don't know about you, but I am facing more and more pressure these days to decrease the number of sales tools and the cost. Like not just a little, but like coming down very heavy-handed, we have lots of tools. And so that means building a business case is even more important than it's been in the past. Because there isn't, I was saying to someone else, I've never purchased software, by the way, because I had a budget for it. Never. Now, once you're using it and there's value, then a budget kind of shows up. But you have to make the business case for it. One example of really building this business case, at a startup I was at, we did some research. I worked with sales ops for this and determined that the average ramp time should be, this was several years ago, 90 days plus the average sales cycle. Now, these days with tools and everything, it's probably more like 45 days plus the average sales cycle. But for us, it was 90 days. We figured it out. Our current baseline was taking 12 months to ramp, and it should take 9. So we did the math, we kind of went through, and we actually discovered that if we could get, for every new sales rep that we could get from 12 months down to 9 months, we bring in $100,000 of additional revenue to the company. And since we were getting ready to hire a bunch of people, that was very much of an ROI. Now, that stats made it relatively easy to get it approved. Now, if you've ever had to get a CFO write a check, it really wasn't easy. I had to be prepared. I had to defend the very tough questions they were asking. So super important. When you actually, we're going to talk about renewal in just a little bit, but when it comes to renewing software, it makes it a lot easier when you can have a very solid business case from the beginning that has metrics, KPIs tracking, so that when you go to renew, you can see that, yes, it indeed brought the value. So don't choose simply on price. Another mistake I made was don't roll out a bunch of tools at once. Don't roll them out, even if you're in succession. I went to a startup, they didn't have any sales, really not much of a sales tech stack, and they said, we want you to build us out a world-class tech stack. And I did, in about 8 weeks. You're probably wondering, why are you listening to this ignorant man? Because that was a huge mistake. I'm kind of one of those, just go fast, break things, I'll just clean it up later. The mantra, you can take off a Band-Aid slowly, not a lot of pain over time, or just rip it off. That does not apply when it comes to rolling out a bunch of sales tools. Right? It causes harm, actually, to sales reps. They're confused. It causes conflict with other departments trying to figure out, when do I use this and what. It is not a good idea to roll out a bunch at once. So, what the lesson learned is focus on one solution at a time. And I would even say one use case, or a minimal amount of use cases at a time. Some of the software we're buying today has multiple use cases, right? As everyone's buying all these different companies and creating their own and bundling together, it would be a mistake to buy one of those and roll out a bunch of use cases all at once. It causes lots of challenging situations, for sure. So my advice is to roll them out, kind of focus it in. In particular, when you start rolling it out on a use case, one that drives adoption. Because ultimately in my experience has been, you roll out a tool and then later, no one's using it. We chose not to renew one just recently because we looked at the adoption rates and no one was using it. So we're like, why do we need to have it? So focus on rolling something out with adoption in mind. We're doing that currently. We had software that our commercial group had that our enterprise didn't. So we're rolling it out to them. And we thought through the process, kind of like building a house. Right? What are the use cases that's foundational? And so we did a training just on that. And then we, a little bit later, went let's put the framing kind of the house and then the roof of the house. And so spreading it out a little bit over time, I think makes it a lot better in terms of adoption, in terms of use. The other thing, because I rolled a bunch of them out at once, a lot of the vendors said, hey, we have an 8-week rollout plan or a 12-week rollout plan. And I was like, no, I need it done in 2 weeks because I have another one coming. And so I skipped a bunch of steps thinking it wasn't such a big deal, and in reality it was a pretty big deal. If a vendor has been around for a while, and if they have sold, they have a number of customers, they have a good idea of what it takes to actually roll out their software. Now, your company's different, culture's different, so it's not exact. But lean on them. They know what they're doing when it comes to that. This was mentioned yesterday as well. Don't neglect change management. This is huge for when you make change, there's this like ripples, right, of effects that go around. I think the skill that we teach sales reps on handling objections is a good skill for us in enablement when it comes to deploying software. We need to think ahead, what are the objections going to be? I rolled out conversation intelligence back in 2017. And so I knew, because it was really new and none of the salespeople had ever used it before, that this big brother idea was going to be an objection they had. And so I just included that at the beginning of our rollout. I just addressed the elephant in the room. And the other thing is, as we're rolling it out, is I tried to raise awareness of kind of the current challenges, right? It's helpful when you're rolling something out to say, this is why we're doing it. Right? Remember, you're having a hard time finding content, so this is the solution to help make your life easier. So selling on value. The other thing that we want to do is share the projected positive business outcomes. And so I want to make sure that everyone knows kind of what's going on. So when we launch Call Intelligence, right, the big kind of objection they have is, well, how do I introduce this to the customer? The customer, everyone's nervous about it. And so arming them with and here's how I always say it, we have a new technology that takes notes for me, and it does that by recording the call and transcribing it. Would you like a copy of it afterwards? I'm happy to send it. Is that okay? And listen to thousands, no one has said no. I'm sure out there someone has said no at some point. Even Apple, when we did a call with Apple, they were like, no, it's fine. And it's like Apple, if they say yes, it's, secretive as they are. So it's important to talk about, in rolling out software, like the value. So hey, sales rep, what is the value of not being able to take notes, not needing to take notes? Well, you can be present, right? Fully present on the call, which is amazing, right? You talk about the value of being able to take your call and give it to your solution architect or sales engineer so that they can listen to it, watch it before the demo, which makes the demo better. They like it. They love it, actually. And so that's super important. Share about things like elite athletes use game film. And so making sure we now have a tool so that we can be elite, just like elite athletes. Putting that spin on it, but it's the positive business value so that they get excited about it. Now, I looked at this yesterday and I thought it's kind of silly for get leadership buy-in to be the third bullet point on this slide. It really should be the title of it, right? Right? Get leadership buy-in is critical. And I don't just mean senior leadership. Obviously, senior leadership, that's super important. But I mean frontline managers. I don't know about you, but I have built so many sales enablement programs and done so many sales trainings only to have the seller go back to their manager and their manager say, oh, read this book. I like it better than the methodology you were taught in onboarding. Or, oh, don't follow that process. Here's what I like to do. So I'm on a quest right now that we should train frontline sales managers on these tools first, because they're the ones inspecting it. They're the ones encouraging it. They're the ones to enforce it. And so why roll it out if it's not actually going to get used? And so really start with them in mind. I mentioned this earlier, but really when it comes to deployment, we're going to craft a vision with a plan to identify kind of goals, milestones, KPIs. I'm not a real detail-oriented person, so I kind of tend to just want to jump in the deep end, but after almost drowning a couple times, I've surrounded myself with some people on the team who are good at that and help us have a plan as we move forward. Super, super important to do that. The way we roll out software these days, and I really like it, is that we start with a small sample group, a pilot group, if you will. We are just rolling out this new tool for our sales managers, and it's about sales activity. And it's just a way to give them a dashboard so that when they have their one-on-ones, they're able to have accurate data of the activities. And so we started with just a small group. From that small group, we moved on to, we got their feedback, we made some improvements, and so we really we're really focused in on doing that. And then what we do is we turn around and utilize them for training. Which I think is pretty powerful when you do it. We sometimes will do video testimonials or things like that, because in the end, we want our sellers to hear about the value of these tools from the sellers themselves, from their peers. It goes way better than just another sales enablement tool. A quick kind of caution as we do this, which is don't sell the administration and management features. right? So, those of you that are software vendors, like, you sell to us in a great way, which is what matters for us. But I've seen sales enablement people take that and turn around and try to sell that to their team. Like, no, who's in the room? Who's the audience? What's in it for me, for the sales reps? Another point is, don't train the tool, train the use case. Don't train, here's how to use a hammer and nail. Train, here's how you hang a photo in your office, right? It's super important to do that. We've been changing our onboarding process, and the way we rolled out tools was, here's a training on software A, and you complete it. Here's a training on software B, and complete it. Software, like, that just is, it's done in a vacuum. There's no context there, and so you don't remember time later. I'm curious, how many of you have created some sort of chart that says, here's where we use this tool? Like, maybe it's according to sales stages, maybe it's like when prospecting, here are your tools. Like, you know, we have to, like, create some visual, and so don't train the tool, software A, train, here's how we prospect. We use part of software A to do this, part of software B to do this. It's kind of a little bit about what we were talking about the other day, like day in the life training, right? Or in the flow, I think she was saying, in the flow of your job. I think that's super, super important to do that. All right, my time is nearing the end, so let me keep going here. Don't let the vendor do all the training. One time I was busy and kind of lazy and just said, hey, you do it. And that kind of generic kind of rollout training thing, it didn't fit us. It created lots more questions and answers. We need to use them, for sure. We need to leverage them, but we need to own the why we're doing it, right? We need to own the value of it. And then lastly, don't auto-renew without doing a value realization audit. Value realization is kind of a buzzword, I know, right now, but it's really important to say, is this tool bringing value? If so, renew. If it's not, then don't. I don't have time to go through it, but I found this from Bain & Company and Harvard Business Review. I break it out. There's like 20 different, 40 different elements of value. So don't just consider price, which everyone kind of jumps to the bottom of the pyramid, right? There's many other things that they could do. You know, commitment, stability, cultural fit. And then the top part is inspirational and individual value. So when it comes to renewing your software, definitely do the same thing like when you're purchasing something. You're just kind of doing it again. Is it bringing value or not? All right, I think there's some Q&A time here.
All right, we do have one right out of the gate, Matt. How do you handle a situation where the tool fails? The users are unhappy. It's just not going well despite the best change management efforts.
So I think it depends, right? It depends on why is it failing. So you really have to diagnose that. Sometimes tools don't fail; it's user error, right? And it's a real thing, right? They're frustrated in how to use it. So maybe there's training on how to use it. If the software itself isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, that's kind of a fail on you for rolling it out. I mean, that's part of the due diligence in trying to find it. It's why I've gone through some of the people's demos, and I'm less believing in some of the demos than I used to be, because I want to see, what does that really look like under the hood? How do I really manage that kind of thing? And so I think you have to try to avoid that at all costs. But sometimes it's just sales reps are not good at using tools, and you have to really kind of handhold and help them out.
All right. Another one just came in. How do you determine when to train new hires specifically on each of the tools in your stack?
I think the just-in-time, that's one of the things as we were going through our onboarding. We had so much content that first week, and so much content that is not needed until like month 3. And so it was really easy to cut half of the stuff out because it wasn't the appropriate time. So we're in the process of trying to figure out actually where is the right time. Obviously, when someone's starting doing prospecting, account planning, those kinds of early, top of funnel things are the tools that we focus on. We do get to the other tools kind of later on in the process, but keeping in mind the day in the life kind of as the workflow. So where are they in their journey of onboarding, and introducing tools at the right time is super important. We're not great at that at this point, but.
I actually have a question. Because a lot of us deal in global environments, and it sounds like you have as well. What have you found to be best practices to make sure that the tool is going to be compliant, GDPR, Canadian privacy issues, that sort of thing? Any tips you could give us?
At Medallia, we have a very good legal team, and so nothing would ever get through that's not compliant. They have to sign off on everything, so that's the easy answer for now. I think when I was at other smaller companies, that did kind of become an issue. Honestly, our response, partly because we were a smaller company and had a smaller footprint internationally, some things we just said are US only, and didn't love that response, but if not being able to make it compliant, our small legal team said, let's just not do it there. So, including particularly the call recording in 2017.
Yes,
yeah.
Man. All right, nothing else coming in on the wire, Brett?
I've got one for you. So, leadership buy-in is a tricky thing. Paul and I have experienced this before, where you can go in the room, you can show them the bells and whistles, everybody can nod and smile, and then 3 months later, their team isn't using it. What would you say are kind of your follow-up, once you've done the whole show and dance first, to ensure that buy-in actually sticks and deploys?
Yeah, that's really tough. I think the thing that we've tried to do when we've been rolling it out, it's easier now with I have a team, but so Mark right now is like rolling out this tool, and like he owns it not just from the beginning, but he kind of owns it through adoption. And so for an enablement person, being able to say, I'm not done, and I think this happens in a lot of departments, right? We roll something out and it's like check mark, we've done it, and it's not actually being used. And so we try to at least make it through to that point of adoption. And then because our renewal process takes a while, and we really do a value realization on them, it doesn't take too long before we're jumping in and looking at those metrics to see, are we going to renew in 6 months or not? So that's kind of what we do, but it is super hard.
Yeah, we have
Similar question, but when it comes to frontline managers, if you do have that higher level buy-in, but to the example that you gave, they have a preference for a different methodology or a different approach, and more resistant in getting them over to your side.
Yeah, I try to use the top-down and bottom-up approach at the same time, sandwich them. So I go to the senior leaders and we're talking about the problems and say and this is an issue now, we're trying to standardize kind of across all the different groups and saying this is how we do one-on-ones, this is how we do pipeline, this is how we do forecasting, like totally putting it out. We can't roll out a forecasting tool and then you use Excel. And so I've got to get the top ones coming down to everyone saying this is how we're doing it. And then from the bottom up, the frustration that sales reps have of needing to use this for that and this for that, to be able to say, you start talking to your manager about the pain and struggles that you're going through. I've had mixed results in that. Right now, we're having good results because it is a company-wide initiative for our sales to go into that manager operating rhythm. That includes all the tools and includes all the different meetings, and we want, it's being required, so.
Right. I think you're handing up first. We'll try to get to both, so we'll start. We can do that.
Just a quick question. When you're getting your tech managers, you get a practice of asking for a client referral to talk to, and if so, what are some hidden gems of questions you can ask them when you get them on the phone?
That's a good question. I tend to like to not use the ones that they would give. We know each other, and so we know who has what. So I've tended to reach out to people I actually know and do a little reconnaissance that way, rather than it's not like I haven't talked to a customer referral before, but for the most part, it's kind of like job interviewing, right? It's you're never going to give someone who doesn't like you out for that. So,
All right, hold on. So we had somebody at this table. Yes, there.
So I feel like with tools, we sometimes reach a point of saturation. People just can't take any more tools. How many tools do you think is a reasonable number to ask people to actually use?
And whose definition of reasonable, right?
It's an interesting question. I definitely I would have said there is no limit 10 years ago, but I do think now there probably is. It's kind of like, again, what are you trying to do? And if you have something that helps you do your job, it's like you have tools in your garage and you like, you know, have stuff, maybe you don't use it all the time, but now I need to do the specific thing and this is the tool for that. And so, and I think the people's capacity is varied. Like there's some people in particular, I feel like some younger ones who like can handle lots and lots of tools because they have lots and lots of apps on their phones. They're used to using all kinds of things. And those of us who are a little older, maybe not quite, you know, different. So there really is no answer. I just think I do think that the bundling is a good thing in the end. I do think like having one tech stack to rule them all kind of tool is like a good thing. I just don't know how we transition to it, because when you have the best in breed of all the different kinds, how do you rip one out and add just one piece and then another? Like I think that's a challenging thing.
All right, last one, Matt.
Quick observation. I think I've got a magic question for Alex. You asked the referee, you say, imagine you were not to renew with this vendor, why would that be? So even if they love the vendor, I'm asking, but if you don't renew, why would it be? So then they have to say the thing they least like about it.
Yeah.
I asked that about hiring people that you do with me. Let's say I hire you and you quit in a year's time. Why would that be? And I'm learning about what they value.
That's great.
All right. Thanks for all the
Cool.
questions, and thanks, Matt, for your time. And
Thanks.
appreciate it.